Movidiam Podcast. Join the conversation with global innovators as they share their journeys, discuss the state of the industry, and share insight into the future of media for brands, agencies, and production companies.
Hello and welcome to the Movidiam Creative Leaders Podcast. Today I'm delighted to welcome Andy Nathan, who is the founder and CEO of the Fortnight Collective. Andy, thanks very much indeed for your time today. The Fortnight is something that we're being told in the UK. There's the amount of time we're going to have to spend indoors just at the moment while this dreaded virus is going around. But could you tell me a little bit about the Fortnight Collective and the remarkable career that you've had to get there?
Absolutely, I'd love to. Thanks for having me. I think for us, it's interesting. I mean, the name Fortnight Collective obviously was very much by design. Originally, the intent was a 2-week strategic and creative development process, which we call the ad hack.
Sure. Similar to an offsite.
Exactly. And, the funny thing is, we sort of had the name before. Most people over here, not everyone knows exactly what a fortnight means, but even though we thought, hey, it's sort of an interesting name, and this was obviously before the video game, which my kid clamors over and stuff. But I think for us, we're independent. We sort of pride ourselves on being a brand marketing accelerator that, is focused on, our value proposition is all about helping brands be better, faster. And, in terms of my background, I started my career at big agencies. So, I was at Ogilvy and Mather for about 7 years, working across both the New York and London offices. Worked at agencies like DDB. I was the managing director of Chiat/Day New York. But I think over time, my career became a little more, I went to more sort of creative boutiques. BBH New York was a hugely informative agency for me. And then ultimately got out to Boulder, Colorado, to work at Crispin, Porter, and Bogusky. And, I think from all these experiences, I learned so much, mostly great things, but also just felt like there had to be a better way of working with clients. And so for us, it's very much speed-based. We sort of half joke, if you want to change the world, all you need is the right people and not enough time. And we, firmly believe that, forced deadlines make us better. And so for us, when we work with clients, we do these accelerated processes, and, we've since evolved. It's not just 2 weeks. We do 1-week hacks and 3-day sprints and 2-day sprints and things like that. And then also, we're not just a project agency anymore. We work, as agency of record for certain clients as well. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, as I mentioned. So we have about 13 employees over here, but we also have a London office as well, which is we're about 3.5 years old in Boulder, and London's now about 2 years old.
Very interesting. And you talk about something very interesting there, which is a little bit of constraint on the system or on the business. And that, causes people to really kind of, pull together. And, obviously society at a much wider level today is pulling together to deal with a huge amount of constraint that's being put on us. Why is it that constraint brings out, from your experience, across BBH and Chiat/Day, and why is it that constraint offers a creative flair?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a few things. I think for starters, it does ensure focus, and I think getting the right, people sort of focus, alignment. I think it probably also brings out the best people. If you think about it, more often than not, a long, drawn out process. I sort of half joke that it's like a bad case of marketing telephone. In a lot of big agencies, you have very senior people on both sides of the equation, both client and agency side, attending the most pivotal meetings, but a lot of the sausage making, in between that is from, cascading down to very junior people and then cascading back up. And I think there's a lot of things that are lost in translation there. Whereas if you really get the right people on all sides to be, focused in a very short period of time to ensure alignment, ensure accountability, and then allow others to execute, I think it just works better. And it goes back to, think about in your uni days, when you work on a paper or you study for an exam, the reality is, even though you might know it's coming for 3 or 4 weeks out or a couple of weeks or whatever, odds are you're going to actually focus on it and really sort of do it the few days before. Yeah. I think the same applies to, pitching. When you think about the best pitches you've probably been a part of, they typically are in a really significant time crunch where everyone comes together and aligns on some key, things and then executes.
It's interesting as well, isn't it? Because the some of the distribution methods today are asking for shorter, faster, snappier, very dynamic, productions or creative executions, and that doesn't warrant the 3 to 6 months of preparation to deliver an ad for them. These things need to be developed in rapid time for rapid feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, like we have in our office here in Boulder, we have like an art installation light wall, which is our rallying cry, which is better hustle. And to us, like there's like a duality of message there, which is in this day and age, brand side marketers better hustle. I think if you look at how consumers interact with brands and the types of tools that they have, digital tools, the competitive, context of the environment that these brands live in, they better hustle. But I think for us, like we took it to another dimension, and which is where the duality lies, is that we pride ourselves on enabling better hustle. I think, unfortunately, if you're a big agency, there's really no reason for you to want to accelerate the pace and the process, especially if you're under a very specific sort of retained, compensation model. And so why would you, unless there's like a quick burst where you need to get a new ad out there based on market conditioning, you're just not going to speed up the process. And your clients are probably not going to do it either.
And what do you think what's your view on the sort of structural change piece going on in the holding company agencies? How is this, the Fortnight Collective is obviously a very agile, relatively small, but, very focused team. But you've worked with some of the largest agency groups out there. How do you think that perhaps the sort of, if there's AC or BC, which is before COVID and after COVID, what does the after COVID agency world look like?
I mean, I would think that in a lot of ways, in some ways, obviously, I think we're thankful because we are well positioned for this post-COVID world. I mean, we basically built around providing an agile process. We, for the most part, have a distributed workforce. We move very quickly. We're affordable, and we're not something. We can do project at just as easily as we can do agency of record. The reality is, I would think that increasingly, big holding companies might need to move to some of those tenets. The challenge with that is that I'm not sure they're going to want to do that. It sort of cannibalizes their existing business model. So, to us, like, we always, we hear from, peers of ours that, they've sort of experimented with our processes and stuff. And the reality is, we have no problems with that. I mean, I don't think everyone can do it as well as others, for a variety of reasons. But I think the other thing is, if you I think for the most part, if an agency is going to do something like this, it tends to be in a break glass in case of emergency situation. And then the problem there is that, the client comes back to them if it works and says, remember that time when we had actually, used variable, variable workforce, and we sort of, did in a very short burst, like, let's do more of that. And I think, again, to me, it does cannibalize their larger business model.
And what do you think about the IP game? I mean, develop as agencies getting into, do you get into any intellectual property and develop alongside brands?
You know what? We haven't to date. We say often, like, ideas and thinking are disposable unless they live in the world. So how do we get to ideas and thinking faster? And to me, I think some of that is we don't get, precious about the ownership of ideas. I think the assumption is that we're going to have, hundreds, if not thousands of ideas, the next time we come out. And so, we want our clients to own the ideas that we present to them. I think it's their right.
Sure.
So we really don't get precious about that.
And in terms of the sort of brands and businesses that you're working for, could you, for our listeners that might be more in the sort of creative ideation for the film production or the CGI or the visual effects development side of things, what is the typical journey a client of yours goes on when deciding to come with the Fortnight Collective, and how have they come to you? How have they come to you? Is it because of a direct personal relationship, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of how they've come to us, it's been a combination of things. I mean, I definitely think it's been people within our network, previous clients of ours, or it could even be, previous agency friends of ours who actually go on to be clients. And then obviously, I think we've gotten some good press. And so I think, honestly, there's been some curiosity. And so some of it has been in sort of inbound, inquiries via word of mouth. And then I think probably the biggest way we've gotten new clients is from our existing clients. It's amazing, like, how we've created sort of these ecosystems of clients who we've had long-term partnerships with, who are constantly sort of referring us to other clients. And so that's been great as well. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's been fairly inbound. And how it works. And that's, the beauty of it. I mean, I think when I was at the last big agency I worked on was Crispin, and, we won the MetLife business, and it literally was like a 7-month pitch process. They literally had their, the previous agency was Young and Rubicam, and they worked with them for some 90 some odd years. And, we ended up winning it, but, it was a 7-month process. My guess is they talked to 12 or 15 agencies, then culled it down to, a chemistry check, to 8 agencies, then to 4 finalists, then to us. And you think of not great odds if you think about that, but obviously the windfall of revenue is pretty high. What we love about ours is that, my next client might reach out to us tomorrow, and literally we could be off to the races, kicking off a process within 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, whatever. And so, and more often than not, I mean, there's times where they'll reach out to us as part of an RFP process, but more often than not, they're literally reaching out to you directly, only you. Mm. And so, you got to like your odds there. If you can land that sort of project. So more often than not, it's, hey, we have a new product launch. Hey, we have a media blitz in a certain market in New York City that we bought, and, we have 45 days or 60 days to execute it. Or it could be, we wanted to do some new packaging design. It really depends. I mean, some of it could be brand invention, brand reinvention. It could be literally a product launch, something like that. But ultimately, we'll talk through what their objective is and their KPIs, and then assuming we agree on the terms of the project, we'll kick it off. Say if it's a 2-week hack, we'll kick it off in 1 day. We'll do very immersive. We'll do a lot of historical sort of brain dump of where they've been to date. Do stakeholder interviews, retail visits, product tastings, whatever. It depends on the type of client it is. But then ultimately, we develop the brand strategy in a couple days, and that could be something as robust as something like a brand platform, or as simplified as a tactical creative brief. Ensure alignment on that, and then we get off to the races with our all-day hack. And obviously, pre-COVID, we used to do those in person, but post-COVID, we've been doing them very comfortably as virtual hacks, and that's basically getting anyone between certainly the client, ourselves, our creative, teams, some agency partners, and literally we sort of attack the problem or solve the challenge in a day. Mm. And so, we go through that sort of brand journey of where they've been and their ambition, and then we'll go through the strategic documents, and then we'll do some brainstorming. And we have a very proprietary process, in terms of certain exercises we do. And then at the end of the day, we'll present a very distinct territories to our clients, and obviously that varies based on the deliverables and what we're driving to. But then, say we present 3 or 4 different concepts to the client, get feedback, the next day or so, and then ultimately go into round 2, which is just creative refinement. And that's where you're really, if you think about when an agency presents a really slick presentation to a client, which probably normally most clients, it might take an agency a month to do it, and we just do it, probably. Yeah. In 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, I think it isn't it. I think there's a lot of that's to do with the mindset and the approach and the tools. And some of the older technologies just couldn't deliver that quickly. And although you've got the experience in some of those older players, it's a pastiche of a great stack of tools that your sort of dynamic team has access to that others just choose not to use just at the moment. But again, I think this COVID piece will cause more people to get into that sort of stuff.
Definitely.
And looking at the sort of macro sort of agency landscape and how clients and brands are going, gosh, well, there's a lot of immediacy required around creative deliverables, and why don't we headhunt a few creative producers and have us inside the brand? So the in-housing argument. I mean, it works for a bit until it gets stale, and then it doesn't work, or is it a great thing? I mean, what's your view on that?
I mean, obviously, I wouldn't say I'm as much of an expert on it. I mean, I think, I don't know, part of me thinks when I look at certain agencies that do that type of thing, like, how excited would you be if you're like a freelancer, or if you're like a creative and you're like working out of like the Royal Mail offices for 4 months on end, or, British Gas, it's just, to me, I mean, I think why I think so many, creatives are going to freelance, obviously in a good economy, is that, there is a market for it. And to go from, when I think about when I worked at big agencies, I worked on Microsoft for years. I worked on IBM for 7 years. Like, it's there's the old. It was a famous ad in the United States, "Time to Make the Donuts," where it's just like that repetitive, methodical, day in, day out. You are grinding for that huge client, and the reality is, like, I think being a freelancer, or in our model, where you could literally go from frozen Greek yogurt one day to life insurance the next day to you know what I mean to
I think humans in general like that. Humans in general like that sort of pecking around,
And so I think, to me, that it's sort of inherent. If you think about it, it makes you not only better at your job, it makes you better as a human being. Like knowing all these aspects, the amount of things that you learn, from picking up each day from your clients. Both, from, the craft of your expertise, but also in terms of like human behavior. And I think there's something very compelling about that. And I think the other thing would be, when you bring this like diverse group of people together at a certain point in the process, it just, you're building off each other's thoughts and ideas. And so I think there's something inherently, getting that distributed workforce to come together with, kernels of ideas to build upon, I think is just better. Whereas when you're sitting in an office of somewhere where there's a complete groupthink, and basically more often than not, I think everyone is basically coming up with solutions that are like, they know that that's what their boss wants. Yeah. Or that's what, and so it's just different. It's very different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that when I think about the success of the internet and some of the major platform success, a lot of these things celebrate the small. You've got the Etsy, the eBays, the Amazon Marketplace. These are massive platforms, and obviously, but they drill into the small 2 or 3 man team selling whatever product it is, and that seems to be the way that humans have organized when the platform economy has come about. And I think the agency model needs a bit of that as well to keep things fresh, to keep things progressing.
100%. I started my career at Ogilvy, and so I learned a lot of the Ogilvyisms over time, and so many of them are just still so relevant today. And one thing he used to say is, go to every park in every city and you won't find a statue of a committee. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think, part of the problem, especially when you have a long period of time, there's always ways to find fault in things. And there's always, the more eyeballs that get on a certain amount of like creative work, it just gets, sort of bastardized over time and just sort of, really just diminished, and so I think that's the other thing about having a very small group of people who have ultimate decision-making power in a very short period of time, is it just allows for great creative work to thrive.
And what do you make of the pace of change, the pace of technological change, and how do you keep up to speed on the multitude of channels and platforms with millions of people that might be relevant for your brands and clients?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we embrace it. I think it's really important for us to better understand like where the world is going, both from consumer behavior and in terms of companies, agencies. But I also am a purist in that I still believe a lot of the core sort of human truths and the way humans sort of behave in the world tends to be over time, consistent, and so. I think on one level, like we're all about chasing down new technologies and new ways of working and new ways of sort of interacting with, our target market. But also, I think there are some sort of elemental things of how humans have behaved over time that I think, stay true even to this day.
And Boulder, Colorado is a fascinating and amazing place, and there's this huge sort of tech scene that's developed out of it. Why did you decide that was a place for Fortnight?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just my backstory, as I mentioned, I think earlier, like, I started my professional career in New York City, loved it, wanted to be on the biggest stage possible. To me, sort of learning, my advertising, craft there would be the place to do it. Then really, I had a huge ambition to work overseas, and ultimately went to the UK, worked out of the London office, actually met my now wife there. We both worked at Ogilvy, and then moved back to New York. And I think as we had a family, it just, New York was just hard, and so for us, I think to live in a place like Boulder, Colorado, So my wife and I both went to work there at Crispin and just fell in love with everything about Boulder. And then ultimately, really didn't leave when I moved out here. And so I think, a lot of people, it's a very entrepreneurial town. And, over time, I just said, this is the place I want to spend the rest of my life. And I think as I learned over, working at Crispin, and I actually was at Victor's and Spoils for almost 5 years, at a certain point I said, why am I doing this for someone else when I can do it for myself? So I started my company and started in Boulder. To me, the decision to open in London, the main reason for me is, I think, what I realized, I looked at should I open in LA? Should I open in New York? But the reality is so many of my clients that I sort of oversee out of Boulder are in places like LA or New York or Chicago. And the reality is I very much can, cover them from Boulder, Colorado. So I was like, well, where can I go? And, I think to me, given our model, I think we're very well positioned, when you think about, with the uncertainty of at the time Brexit, and obviously now even things like COVID-19. The reality is we love the idea of following the sun. We collaborate a lot between Boulder and London, so we could have a project and literally send a brief over, as we go to bed, and London could work on it for a couple hours, and then we sort of get back to it, and before we even get into a hack, we have some ideas and thinking from it. So we love that idea. We love the idea of just partnering. Obviously, given my I have family there now, or my in-laws, to me personally, it just seemed like a place that we'd want to open our second office.
Makes sense. Well, look, Andy, it's been great talking to you. Very interesting going through your career, and perhaps we can catch up in 6 months' time when perhaps the world has changed again. So today we've been speaking to Andy Nathan from the Fortnight Collective. Andy, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, George.
You've been listening to the Movidiam Podcast. Movidiam is a world-class network of production talent complemented by secure tools that blend hiring, communication, and payments. Find out more at movidiam.com.